Hi there, welcome to our video seminar on divination, intuition, and synchronicity. My name is Henry Reed, and I'll be your conductor for this fascinating journey we're going to take. It's going to be quite a learning adventure. In these video seminars, we're going to be looking deeply into the meaning of divination. We're not, however, going to focus on the technical aspects of how to use one of the classic divination tools, such as the tarot or the I Ching. Instead, we're going to focus on the spiritual essence of divination and what that means for you. The esoteric secret of divination is this: it is a training ground for you to develop your own intuition. As you become more confident in your use of a divination tool, you begin to realize that the real divining rod is within you. My goal for you is to discover that you can use your own intuition to see into divine order, to perceive what is in the harmony of the moment. This video seminar is going to help you broaden your perspective on divination, and it's also going to give you the confidence in your own ability to perceive directly and intuitively. Your divination tool can certainly become a friendly companion, but you don't need to become dependent upon it. If you work with the learning projects demonstrated in these videos, you'll be able to conduct divination with whatever you wish, whatever you find at hand, simply using your own heart. I've conducted many live seminars on divination, and I'll share with you some of the highlights of these classes on this video. In fact, we're going to look in on a class right now where I'm explaining the spiritual meaning of divination. Let's take a look. Okay, divination. What is divination? Divination basically means to divine God's will. To go into divine means to know what is in the divine mind, what is in divine harmony or divine order. We get to a crossroads in life. We're coming to a place where we have a question. We don't know what we should do. That's when we consult divination because things are not all clear for us. When we're in the flow, when things are moving, when things are going okay, we don't even think to ask questions because we're very spontaneously, we're moving along, we're doing our thing, we're in a groove, everything is fine. But for whatever reason, you fall out of that flow and you don't quite know what should you do here and so on. Divining means to ask what would be in divine harmony, what would be in divine order, what is my place, what is my path, what am I to do at this particular juncture. Now ideally we would know. Ideally somehow by going within, by meditating, by making the attunement to our higher self, we could pause, relax, tune into our heart and ask, what am I to do? And the answer comes. And if divination is to really serve us well, it should, in the long run, teach us how to do that. It should make it easier for us to go inside when we're confused and find those answers. That's its purpose. If your involvement with divination makes it more difficult for you in the long run to go inside and ask and get an answer, if it makes you less trusting of your own intuition, then the divination is not serving you, because it should help you to be more confident that you can make the attunement and know what is divine order. Now let me say a little bit about divine order. Divination is based on an assumption. It's based on, you might say, a certain state of consciousness that we have within us when we just feel that somehow the whole universe flows with the same heartbeat. That there's some kind of an inherent harmony, an inherent connectedness, an inherent flow and sympathy among all things, as if life were a symphony orchestra playing, da, 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 and we're part of it. And everything interacts, everything interrelates with everything else. And so you have your song to sing, and you play your notes just at the right time. You've come into this life just at the right time to say your bit, play your song, meet with the people that you're supposed to meet with, and so on. It's all part of this beautiful creation that exists in this special, whether you want to call it dream time like the Aborigines of Australia, or just in the Creator's head, or whatever image that you might have of it, of existing outside of time and at the same time expressing through time. So that there is a, you might say that there's a script, or there's the score as in music, or a plan, or the image, or something that is divine order. So when you come to a point when you're singing your song, da 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 da, da, and you went, what's the note I'm supposed to sing? And for some reason you don't know what it is, that there is, the knowledge exists. It exists in divine mind. You have to get into divine mind and experience it. Now this is where the divination systems come in, whether it's tarot, I Ching, throwing some shells, looking at the clouds in the sky, listening to the birds, or looking at bird poop, whatever system you want to look at. The purpose of it is that here you are in a spot. You want to know, what is the song right now? What is my thing to do? And you know, because of divine order and the way it is, everything is reflected in everything else. It's as if we were all a bunch of soap bubbles, and we could look at the soap bubble, and on the surface you would see all the other soap bubbles reflected in it. So your song is reflected in the clouds. Your song is reflected in the bird poop. Your song is reflected in the throw of the shells. Your song is reflected in the sound of the waves. You're everywhere. But for some reason, you're having difficulty seeing, understanding, knowing your particular thing at this moment. So you ask for help. And so you turn to a divination system. So you throw some shells. So you look up at the clouds. So you listen to the wind in the trees. So you make some tea and look at the leaves. Or you take some rocks and throw them, or you lay out some cards. Or you put some shells on a drum and start beating the drum, and the shells bounce around on the surface of the drum. Whatever is your particular system. Divine order is everywhere. So, just as your move is in your heart, so your move will be in the clouds. So your move will be in the dog poop. So your move will be in the shells. Whatever, it'll be there. So you throw your divination system, and it's like an echo. It's an echo of something. It's a reflection of something. It's a mirror image of something that you're trying to get in touch with. You have it in your heart through your own direct contact and oneness with divine order, and you also see it reflected in the shells. You see it reflected in the clouds. And now you have two to work with. You're always working with two. One is the clouds or the shells or the tarot cards, but the second is in your heart. It's your own intuition, because your own intuition is going to govern how you look and interpret. Your own intuition is going to see its reflection in the cards, in the clouds, in the shells, in the sounds of the wind and the trees or whatever. Your own intuition will see itself reflected in those things, and it will respond to certain patterns and not notice others, because it's going to respond to what it knows. It's going to see and recognize what it knows. So when you're doing a reading, when you're looking for a divine order reflected in these various systems, you are in fact calling upon your intuition. Some people maybe are of an orientation, say a more extroverted orientation, where they see the pattern, they see divine will in the colors on the oil slick, or they see the divine will in the clouds, and they actually see it there, and that's where they experience it, and they're less aware of the fact that it's their intuition is guiding their looking. Because when we go in, you see, to cast our divination, to consult the oracle, and we say a prayer, you know, we're attuning ourselves, we have an intention, we want to know what divine order is. We recognize that we're always a part of divine order, and so divine order is within us, and we're asking that divine order guide us in our looking at the shells or the clouds or the sound of the birds and the trees or whatever. And divine order then guides our attention, the way our eyes look here and look there. Divine order guides the patterns that come into our mind to organize and help us see those faces in the clouds and hear those melodies in the rustling of the leaves in the tree. And divine order is operating through our intuition then to organize our experience of the oracle and help us. So we're aware of that, and there are the two. There's the inner and the outer, and they're being brought together. One of the statements that Edgar Cayce often made when talking about how do you seek spiritual guidance, one of the things that he said very often was correlate those truths, meaning find the truth within and the truth without and see what they have in common. When we talk about seeing metaphorically or seeing symbolically, because a lot of divination work involves perceiving and understanding in symbols, because many of the principles, the truths, the lessons in divine order are not available to the rational mind. They're irrational or non-rational, and they can only be expressed symbolically. Sometimes they involve paradox or contradiction. They involve the possibility that you can be everywhere all at the same time, the possibility that you're both right and wrong simultaneously, and for you to work with both of those simultaneously. That we have to work symbolically. And what happens when we're working symbolically? We are perceiving an outer event in terms of a filter, in terms of a special looking glass. We're looking at a situation in terms of something else. We see a situation as a flowering, for example. We're using the notion of a flower as a metaphor, as a symbol, and it starts governing how we look at something. We start looking at its emerging properties. We look at its unfolding properties. We look at how something that's small and hidden from view is coming more into view, is expanding, becoming more of itself. We start ignoring other things about that situation that involve perhaps dropping away or moving or turning or fold. There's a lot of stuff about the situation that we ignore because we're looking at the situation in terms of how the image of a flower is guiding our understanding. That's a correlating of a truth. There is a truth about a flower that it unfolds, that it opens. And so then to correlate the truth of a flower with the situation is to say, in what way is this situation genuinely opening, expanding, coming more into its own? That's that correlation. Now, the process of divination is inherently a spiritual process. By spiritual process, that is, you are asking, not my will, but the greater will. You want to know what it is. You recognize, I'm not a separate being here. I'm connected to a larger whole. You're coming in humility and saying, I'm lost and I need to find my way. You're coming in faith and saying, I can find the way both within and without, because within and without are one and the same. So it's a spiritual process. But in many of our traditional religious upbringing, divination has been frowned upon, made taboo. What is this taboo? What is it? Are they just being narrow-minded? Is it that they just don't understand? Or is there some basis for the taboo? Is there some good reason for it? One of the things in the Bible that I remember that used to get God pissed off was when people would worship statues rather than knowing that they and God were one, and that God was this ever-present being. In the Muslim religion, is Islam, they don't allow people to make drawings of God because it's so easy to be misled. We fall in love with our pictures. We fall in love with these images. And because there's something very powerful about images, because images are kind of like our soul's blood. We're created in imagination. We're created through an image. We understand and we create through imagery. So imagery is very powerful, but imagery is kind of like the conversation. It's not the soul who's speaking. It's just the words that are flying by, but we can get caught up in them. And the term for that that's been used has been idolatry. Mistaking the reflection for the reality. Falling in love with the image and forgetting about the source. Becoming attached to the reflection and neglecting what the reflection is reflecting. And that makes sense. That we can see that we all have a tendency to do that. It's something about our makeup. We get hypnotized into the three-dimensional world, and so the reflections become very naturally our reality. And we forget about the greater reality beyond that. So when we would go into very naturally a divination system, whether we're going to look at dog poop or we're going to look at tarot cards, we're going to somehow start imbuing them. Since we're seeing our intuitions reflected there in our divination systems, it'll be very easy then to start becoming attached to the card as somehow holy. And whereas, say, for example, in tarot, there is a tradition that you keep your cards in a special place, maybe wrapped in some special Polar Plus fabric, and maybe only you touch them, so it's only your vibes and so on. And the intention behind that is good, is that this is a sacred act to go through the divination. But for the part of us who's more simple-minded, we can start taking that somehow God is these cards themselves, and that these cards have the power. And it would be natural for us to do that. It's not because we're dumb or because we're sinners or we're inferior beings. It's just the nature of the three-dimensional type psychology is to become involved in the imagery. So the traditional religions say better safe than sorry. Since people have a tendency to want to make golden calves and dance and sing around them and bow down to them, why encourage it even more by allowing them looking into dog poop and tarot cards and stuff like that? Because then they will start putting the power into those things and develop the superstition. That is, by superstition, because once we see our intuition reflected in a particular meaning in the card, then start believing that that particular meaning resides in this card inherently and always, and so that the particular meanings start to be very fixed, and all of a sudden we start to find ourselves being governed by those things that are in the divination system, rather than looking at it as a mirror and starting to believe that somehow divine order is rather than a revelation of our participation in creation. It's rather some jail, it's some external structure that's been imposed upon us, and it's separate from us that we want to kind of move around, trick, or do something with, and we get taken down a wrong path. So under the philosophy of better safe than sorry, under the philosophy of above all do no harm, it's just easier and it's simpler to just say to folks, look, let's burn our tarot cards. When you see dog poop, put it in a bag and take it to the dump. Don't be playing in it. Just like with dreams. They started coming down on dreams because people could start becoming superstitious about their dreams. And it's not that there's something wrong with the dreams, but if we start looking for shortcuts, which naturally it's what we want to do, rather than practicing making the attunement, then it's very easy to take a dream and say, oh, this dream is telling me that I should blah, blah, blah. And we stop thinking, we stop meditating on the situation, and we've got an easy answer. So I say, wait a second, maybe if people are going to do that with dreams, and dreams sort of invite that kind of thing, maybe it's just as well that we tell folks, don't mess with the dreams, don't mess with the tea leaves, just come here to church and we will practice our catechisms and our affirmations and our habits of 7 effective people or whatever, and we'll stay on the right and true. Okay? And these have been formulas that have been worked out, that have been proven that they'll get you where you're going and so on, and we won't have a lot of this diversion. So that is some of the origin, I think, then on the creation of the taboos or negative feelings around these divination systems. But the spirit of it, the origin of it, was not as that. So what we want to do then is to come to recognize that when we throw the shells or play with the tarot cards, that we're actually going through a process of looking into a mirror. We're going through a process of seeing ourselves. We're going through a process whereby we know that the intuition of divine order is with us, but for some reason we're not in contact with it. Maybe we're scared. Maybe we have a developmental block or something of that sort, so we want a little nudge. So what is the thing for me to do? Well, it's the... I can't quite get it out. All right, so I throw the shells, and I look at the shells and say, oh, I see. And what the shells are doing is stimulating the awareness that was in here, but that we couldn't get to. Now, this process that happens through a number of different ways, but very often a synchronicity, like the toss of the shells. They arrive randomly on the ground, or we look up at the clouds and that seems to be random, or the position, the cards that come up seems to be random. And the synchronicity, that is the apparent randomness, and yet we find something meaningful in the array, is our intuition being able to work with a process which is not a cause and effect, that the divine order is causing these cards to land this particular way, causing us to go and do this particular thing, but rather it's the same divine order that's being expressed in these cards that's being expressed in me right now, but I'm feeling a certain amount of block. And we'll come to see, by working with our intuition and recognizing our intuition at work in the divination, that in fact, inside of us is the tarot cards, inside of us are the seashells, inside of us is the I Ching, and that we can come over time to, when we are out of touch with divine order, to close our eyes and listen, and maybe a picture will appear. Close our eyes and listen, and maybe we'll hear a voice speak to us. Or just turn and look at one of our friends sitting around, and just their face tells us what we need to know. That the knowing divine order is everywhere. It's the possibilities for it exist in many places. It's told that the I Ching masters could see the hexagrams in the way the grass was blowing in the wind, that it would be there, that they didn't have to throw the stalks. At the same time, we can develop a sense of an appreciation, you might say, in the way a scholar does, that the psyche, the mind of creation, the mind of God, our mind, is very, very old, and it's been walked through a number of times, and there's a lot of knowledge that's been built up. And that there is some wisdom inherent in the hexagrams. There is some wisdom inherent in the tarot cards. There is some wisdom in these various patterns, because these patterns have been going on and people have been walking through these patterns many, many, many times. And so when we use a particular system that's been around, like the tarot or the runes or the I Ching, you have maybe hundreds, thousands of years of life experience are put into this particular system, saying, these are the main chords, these are the main melodies in the symphony of life. And so that when you are looking into, in your divination, looking into the oracle, you see not just reflected your intuition in terms of you knowing what to do, but you also see reflected the deep mind. And as you start to probe it, it can start teaching you, start taking you into deeper parts of your own mind, stimulating ideas, images, possibilities, so that there is a teacher there. At the same time that we can work with a system that's very old, that's has a lot of history to it, we can, by our own intention to be a vessel, be a channel, we can create a brand new system and have that system reflect a lot of wisdom without even knowing that we're doing it, because we are very ancient ourselves. Our mind, our psyche is very, very old. And play, especially when we're willing to just have fun and play around, we can see that we can be very inventive. The play, which is kind of like the spirit of synchronicity, where the random element, the fun element, comes in and fools around, that when we allow ourselves to be playful, we can, like kids when they say, out of the mouths of babes, these great wise sayings come, because it's all stored within. So you can have two contradictory things going on at the same time. You can have justified respect and reverence for a system, say as tarot or I Ching, that's very ancient, and a lot of collective wisdom is going into it. And at the same time, invent a totally brand new system that apparently has only whimsy in it, and the random act of fun at that particular time, and yet at the same time get value out of that. And hopefully, and the goal should be, in working with the divinatory system, is to A, become a student of human nature as it expresses itself in our lives, as it's expressed in these systems, and at the same time start to gain respect for your own intuition, for your own ability to make the attunement. Because what you'll start seeing happening is you'll start to recognize that as you're doing the reading. Maybe it'll occur to you, you got these cards once before, but you're not saying the things that you said last time. In the back of your mind, you're remembering what you said last time, but this time you're not saying that, you're saying something different. Because what you're saying now makes more sense to you on this particular occasion, and you realize that your own intuition is governing what you're saying. Your own intuition is guiding you in your reading, and you're gradually starting to realize that your own intuition is playing a big role. It's being the secret guest all along, and it takes a while to learn that. We come often feeling perhaps out of touch with our intuition. We're feeling less confident of our intuition. But the tarot cards and so on, wow, they're really something. So we lean on them, we start working with them, we start finding insights through the process that work for us, and then we start to realize that this secret guest that's been present. And then the divination system becomes kind of like a midwife for us. It's a teacher for us. It's an initiator taking us, helping us to learn to make that contact, make that attunement to our own intuitive feeling for divine order. I remember seeing a video of a man who was explaining a tarot deck, and he was laying down all of the cards, and he was explaining how you do a reading, and he started to do the reading, and he says, you know, now it's interesting, I just was interpreting this yellow flower on this card. He said, now this card has come up in many readings that I've done in the past, but do you know that this is the first time I ever noticed the yellow flower in it? I've never seen this yellow flower until now. He says, now this is a perfect example, you see, of how our intuition is being guided to look and notice and arrange things in particular ways. For this particular reading, that yellow flower is very prominent in my interpretation of the meaning of this spread. In the past, it has played no role. It's because I am being guided in what to see. That's the operation of the divine line operating through my intuition, shaping my perceptions, shaping my interpretation. And the more and more that you work with these things, if you will make that your goal, that I want through the divination system to know divine order, and part of knowing divine order is to know that I am a part of it, and to know that I'm a part of it, that I have a part of me in there who is connected, who is knowledgeable, who's savvy, who's competent, and knows how to see the writing on the wall, the writing inside. You make that the goal of divination, not that, hey, I'm going to be able to lift up the secret wall and peer into things I normally couldn't see, and you're trying to somehow cheat, you're trying to somehow get around what you think is an obstacle, then you're using divination in a way that there's a reason why they make it taboo. But if you're using divination, you're saying, because I want to claim my birthright. I want to be taught and affirm and learn and establish that I have the capability of making the attunement, knowing divine order, knowing God's will or plan, or however you wish to think of that or visualize that. And this is a system in which I am learning how to do that. And at some point I may throw away the system, or I may continue with it, but in a very different way, because I'm starting to appreciate my own involvement in making the system work. Then you can be, I think, sure that you're walking a spiritual path of something that will pay off for you, because you're going to come out of it feeling more aware of that symphony, that music, that vibration, that flow, that sympathy and harmony of the universe. And that really is, I think, the ultimate purpose of the divination systems. Well, I hope that explanation of divination was helpful. I think it's good to get the big picture before we get into the details of how to do a tarot reading. I think it helps to get a spiritual foundation for the meaning of divination. I think the concept of divine order provides a really good framework for understanding divination, and also it helps us when we want to answer some of the questions that divination raises. When we think about divination, for example, we can be concerned about free will and destiny, because divination often has the connotation of telling the future. And so we wonder, do I have any choice in this matter? Also, we wonder, how is it that we're ignorant about divine order, or we're ignorant about what to do in a situation, and how come it is that we can learn the answer through divination? What's at stake here? What are the issues involved? Now, after the talk that I gave at that seminar, some of the students asked me some questions, and I had a chance to make some additional comments, and we'll see some of these now, and we'll hear some of these questions addressed. So let's look back in on the seminar and see some of these additional comments and some of the ideas that they add to our understanding about divination. We still have, we have our choices, like what's our choice of ideals and values. We ask, what is in harmony at this moment we can then, we say, oh, the universe is wanting us to play in the key of C. Well, there's still lots of ways in which you can do that. You're really in, though, to something a little bit different, and so you have a dialogue and create some kind of a compromise. One of the things that we learn in the Creation of Consciousness book from the Inner Life course, having this dialogue with divine order, because perhaps you have something to bring to divine order to move it along a peg, and that co-creative kind of a possibility. As we'll see, one of the things is in our text is that divination being kind of like a dream to, and I didn't say that so much, is to talk about how come we don't know? How come we don't know what's in divine order at this moment? Why are we turning to a divination system? What's the block? That it's in some way or another we've gotten blinded by an emotion or a thought or a system of belief or a relationship tangle or something that's got us, and so we need a counterbalance. We need something to show us another side of things. And so we turn to a divination system in the same way that we might turn to a dream, to have our focus broadened up a little bit so that we can look at the whole picture. Now looking at a bigger picture, having perhaps been touched emotionally, so that our attachment to a particular way of looking at something has been broken for a moment. The spell that we were under is broken, so that we can look at a bigger picture and then make some kind of a decision or a plan based on more information than we were taking into account. Maybe there was something hidden, something we were unaware of. We were, I can remember, like, for example, I was at the Intuition Conference in Denver this past spring, and they had cards on the table for us all to choose from, a little bowl. And there was a happy card and a shadow card. And you were to, if you wanted to form a question, you could. You didn't have to, and then draw those two cards. And I was thinking about my professional advancement and whatnot, and I drew on the shadow card, I drew the word revenge. And when I got the card revenge, the first thing that came into my mind was the phrase, "I'll show them." And I realized how much of my achievement motivation was based on a desire to somehow compensate for a feeling of inferiority that had gone way back, and I was going to get rich and famous so I could show them that all this achievement churning and so on wasn't necessarily in quest of a vision that I had, of climbing this tall mountain in pursuit of the ruby or whatnot, as it was also being governed by compensation for some kind of a wound or a hurt or something like that. And there is divination functioning like a dream to bring up something that's being overlooked. Now it was me that brought the phrase, "I'll show them." I was allowing myself to co-create with that divinatory moment. And I brought that to it and then started to work with that. And that's really has been helpful to me in terms of first just looking in the mirror. Can you own up to that? Can you accept that that's part of your motivation? And then, okay, so then what do you want to do about that? What are your ideals say? You really want to be coming from a love place. Okay, you want to be coming from a love place, but you are coming from a revenge place. And so what are you going to do about that? Well, first I had, to spend a lot of time with just going back and being with the person who was hurt. That feels inferior, that feels wounded, who has the motivation for revenge. So again, it's just where, a moment of a divination, it's not so much in the sense of telling the future or fixing you, or I mean in the sense of pinning you down, but rather holding up a mirror to let me see myself in a way that I might not ordinarily see, that's opening me up and putting me in contact with other dimensions of the reality that I walk in. So I can then bring my ideals to bear and say, is this what I want? Is this where I really want to go? Is this in keeping with my ideals, my vision of it? And I say, no, I mean, I don't want to get to the end of the road and say, okay, I got my revenge, and now, I'm lonely at the top. It feels very unfulfilling. I've slain my enemies or what have you, and I feel lonely and sad, and now life's over and I'm just ready for it to begin, but hey, heck, this is not what I want. So, I need to look at that and work to make a change, to make a difference. I don't know that the best use of divination is to ask, what's the future going to bring, what's around the corner, but what is in divine harmony? What am I doing to block my perceiving of this? And how can I get back more into the flow? Because by both mythical accounts and also by studies, we are our happiest. We are more likely to feel that we're doing our purpose in life or experiencing our purpose in life when we're involved in a flow kind of process, when we're doing something for the joy of doing it, and rather than for what it's going to get us later. Even if we take something that has instrumental value because it gets us somewhere down the road, and we can find a way of doing it for the joy of it, we start getting into a different headspace, and we find ourselves more in that flow in which the divine order can be experienced. It's just by being ourselves. Just by being ourselves spontaneously and naturally, we're being who we're supposed to be, which is that image of paradise, that kind of very innocent, you don't have to plan it, prepare it, what have you. Everybody spontaneously and naturally does just right, just what they're supposed to. That's the place we're trying to get back to. Yeah. There's always been some kind of a taboo about divination. Some kind of mixed feelings, like it was very useful, but at the same time it could be misused, or there might be something dangerous about it. This feeling of ambivalence about divination goes way back, even to the ancient Greeks, who frequently used oracles. They tell stories about how divination tricked up people as well as helped them. A classic example is the person who went to a fortune teller and was told that they were going to run into misfortune. So they tried to avoid that misfortune by leaving town, only to encounter that very misfortune into the next town where they went to hide. Suggesting, on the one hand, that you can't really outrun your destiny, or that somehow knowing things that maybe you shouldn't know doesn't necessarily help you out. So a student asked the question, well, is there a right way or a wrong way to go about doing divination? And in response to that question, I had some interesting things to say. Yeah, I would say a proper way and an improper way would be both one of intention and of method. The intention is divine, wanting to know and align oneself more in a more fulfilling way with divine order. Improper would be, I want to somehow separate myself from creation and use a periscope to peer around the corner to see what's going on so I can get a leg up on creation. That would be, I think, an improper. A proper, in the terms of the process, the proper is that you're using it as a meditation, and you recognize that what it's going to do is bring up stuff for you. It's a way of working on you so that you can be helped to reestablish that attunement, reestablish that pipeline, that channel. The improper way would be that you're basically a skilled interpreter of signs, and that there are little spirits or demons or gods or whatever are behind the scenes working the signs, and you're reading, and they're in cahoots with you to give you that periscope look into things. I think the image of oneness, the unity, whether it's the unity of the divine order that brings about the reading or the oracle, or the unity and the oneness of the process of being involved in having it bring things into your awareness, is the high road on divination. Does practicing divination, seeking divine order, does that mean we're supposed to be like sheep and just go along with the plan no matter what? Do we have any say in the matter? Do we contribute at all to the divine plan or to creating harmony with divine order? What is the role of our free will in the choices that we make? Let's go back to the seminar room and see what I have to say about that thorny question. One of the challenges, I think, that we face in life is how to be, on the one hand, come from a love space where we feel we voluntarily surrender to the impact of being and feeling interconnected with all life, where we're not in control of what happens, and at the same time take responsibility for that. And that there's a temptation to want to go for power. If we're going to be subjected to all of these things, then let's go for power so we can protect ourselves and gain some control over how events go. Or to take another point of view where we would feel that we really have no free will, and we're wanting to at least know the things that are going to happen to us, as if we are somehow a passive victim or a passive pawn in these kind of events. Both of those are steps to evade the very difficult, and I certainly find it difficult, to be both open, vulnerable, being affected by events around me that I am interconnected with, and at the same time not want to somehow control those things because they're going to have such impact on me, and to try to somehow love and come into harmony with those things, even though I don't always understand the purpose or why these things are happening or how to make sense out of them. So divination could be used like anything else, in the human community, can be used to further our attunement and growth, or it could be used to evade that or avoid that task and try to go for power or something like that because of being afraid and feeling separate and vulnerable from the various elements. Now, for a lot of people, doing divination means doing it for somebody else. So another question comes up as well, related to the question of free will, and that is it possible to do divination for somebody else, and instead of empowering them so that they see their choices, that you could possibly depower them so they take what you say as somehow engraved in stone, that it takes away their own free will, that it's fate and there's nothing that they can do about it? Is there a helpful way and a less helpful way to do a divination for somebody else? Let's look at that issue for a second. And about doing it for oneself, doing it for another person, and the power trip involved in, in the potential in doing that. Which is not the possibility of, by being a reader, you set yourself up as an expert and depower the person that you're reading for, is not limited to divination. that's in healing, that's in all of the helping things. So in that sense, I want to say, well, it's another issue. On the other hand, we deal with it because we learn how to do the divination partly by reading for one another. We come from a place of not trusting ourselves. So we read for somebody else, they give us some feedback, we start feeling, hey, we can do this. At the same time, though, we want to continue to learn how to do it for ourselves. I mean, the psychic that can only get insights for other people but not for themselves, there's not really much good. It sort of defeats the purpose. But at the same time, sometimes people will do their best when they're doing for somebody else. So I use that as a way of starting. You start with somebody else, learn that you can do it now, now do it with yourself. So there are those two factors involved. But in the counseling class, we take up, I mean, that's the starting place of the whole foundation of how to be helpful. Is to come from a place of vulnerability and sharing rather than of expertise. And that, of course, figures into divination as a system of helping somebody else. Here the emphasis is more on let's explore intuition and synchronicity. We happen to be lots of times using a thing in which we are helping somebody, but that's secondary to the focus. When we think about doing divination for somebody else, it automatically brings up the question of the relationship between the diviner and the person who's seeking help. And if we really want to understand divination, then not just from a technical point of view, but from a spiritual perspective as well, then relationship itself is a key concept. Edgar Cayce often talked about correlating those truths, meaning putting two patterns together and looking at their relationship. So the very act of divination, that is correlating patterns, is one of using the idea of relationship, using relationship between patterns, relationship between yourself and divine order, or if you're doing a reading for somebody else, then a relationship between you and them. So a student who asks about the role of relationship in divination stimulated quite an interesting response, which we can look at now. Correlate those truths is another way of saying, we live in a relationship world. We live in an interconnected world. And it is knowing divine harmony is to knowing two things. It's your song and the theme that's playing. I mean, it's a dance. So if you want to develop a relationship-based worldview, say, as opposed to a thing-based worldview, which is sort of at the heart of the whole feminist revision of thinking in so many different fields. Well, divination certainly is one place in which you can work that out, because the whole thing is predicated on there is an inherent relationship amongst all things. And that is what the harmony is. Well, it is harmony. I mean, that's a playing together, a chord that has a special sound. At an earlier seminar a few years back, I presented the idea of divination in a totally different way, using the statement from Pythagoras that the man is the measure of all things. This is a holographic type of idea in that all of the universe can be reflected in the human being. And thus, the human being and their parts of their body, for example, could reflect things that were going on in the cosmos. So even though the sound quality of this particular clip is not that great, I think it's worth listening to this alternative vision of divination, which actually is a different form of conceiving divine order. Out of divination is coming out of an inner instinct for the general oneness and interconnectedness of things. We can theorize about it a little bit today, at this point at the end of the 20th century, but divination didn't really originate out of some kind of a theory. More, divination is a confession, you might say, or an expression about how people feel in their hearts about how life is all one. One of the other titles for the course that I've had sometimes is The Measure of All Things. And that's from a quote by Pythagoras. Pythagoras is a very important figure in divination and measurement generally. And one of his famous quotes, modernizing it slightly, is that the human is the measure of all things. You are the measure of all things. And that kind of idea is that God, the creator, universe, is reflected in you. There's something about you, whether it's your head and your hands and your feet, and standing in some kind of a posture, or if it's a hair on your head, or the lines in your hand, or the patterns in your spit, or images in your mind, or whatever piece of you we take or look at, that little part reflects the whole, that the human being is a reflection of the whole, and that somehow the human being can become involved in something, involved in the imagery, involved in throwing sticks on the ground, involved in looking around at the pattern of the leaves or what have you, and according to the way they are prompted and stimulated, get a glimpse, a snapshot of what's happening in the universe as a whole. So this kind of a sense of almost, you can imagine and project yourself way back, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And I can remember having something like this in my psychedelic days, of an experience where all of a sudden I'm standing around and I'm aware of all beings. I'm aware of all creation, and it's like I've been here forever in my mind. I'm just sort of a part of it all. And everything is, you might say, vibrating to the same tuning fork, and everything is a part of everything. It's also in that seminar, I expressed the sentiment that I've expressed here today and can be repeated many times, and that is the goal of this training is not simply to teach you how to read tarot cards, but is to awaken your intuition so that you can begin to perceive divine order or the finer relationship among all things in your daily life. Listen to the way I said it back then. Because you will very likely form an attachment. One of you is going to get involved in the Donald Duck Tarot deck and is going to find it really exciting and say, oh, I found the secret to life in the Donald Duck Tarot deck. And another of you is going to get involved with the Wheaties crystal system of divination, and it's going to be the answer to all things. And you're going to go around and give readings and base naming your kids on what the Wheaties say and stuff. And that would be fine, because that's a natural thing that we can do. That's why they wouldn't have a prescription against worshiping idols in the Bible if it were a natural thing to do. That we tend to worship and are hypnotized by the effects that we see. So that's only natural. But I'd like you at the same time to have an appreciation how, that the Wheaties that you're using or the Donald Duck Tarot deck is just an expression of a system. And if you happen to be without your Wheaties, maybe you could use some oatmeal and it would work just as well. Or maybe you could see how the wind was blowing in the trees and it might work just as well. And you don't have your Donald Duck Tarot deck with you that day, well, you could use a regular deck of cards, or just go inside and close your eyes and pictures would come and it would be all right. It might not be as stimulating as your Donald Duck deck, but you wouldn't feel somehow caught and dependent upon the device. So we want to strike some kind of a balance between kind of understanding the inner spirit and at the same time having the practicality of being able to use these particular devices, and that's going to be part of it, sort of generalized. Ultimately, see, the diviner is inside of you. You're the diviner. Your own consciousness is the diviner, and it's the magic crystal inside of you that makes it work. And that's the goal of all of this, to meet that crystal and become friends with that crystal. And we're using these particular techniques or systems or what have you for that purpose. Okay, we've talked a lot about divine order. We've used the term many times and we've explained it a lot in different ways. So it's time to stop the explanations and it's time to have an experience. I'm going to help you now have an experience of divine order. I'm going to lead you through a process which I'm hoping that you will cultivate and perfect, so that you will be able to enter into the state of consciousness that's in harmony with divine order. I'll be presenting it on this video, and you can be able to use this video as an induction to practice this tape. Or you could, if you like, use it to make a sound recording and play it back. But I think you'll find this video will work quite well. I'm not going to be showing any fancy pictures during it, so you won't be looking at what's on the screen. That's going to be less important. It'll be mainly an inner experience that you'll do with your eyes closed. And then as you practice it, of course, you'll be able to do it with your eyes open, and you will use it as a preparation for your divining processes in the future. Okay, let me tell you what's going to happen. We're going to work with two aspects of getting into the state of consciousness in harmony with divine order. One is going to involve the breath, and then the second is going to involve the heart. And they're going to be related. The heart experience will grow out of the breath experience. The breath experience is something very, very easy and very simple, which it should be, because divine order is a natural state in which spontaneously everybody does everything just right. And what we're going to do is, by observing our breath, we're going to assume that our breathing is happening just right, just the way it is naturally, without you trying to shape it, train it, time it, make it perfect, or do anything of that sort. You're just going to drop into the flow of your breath. The flow state. The flow has often been a term to describe divine order. The ancient Greeks used to talk about the natural harmony of things as if everything was breathing in a common rhythm, that the universe breathed together and thus was in sympathy with itself. So that's what you're going to do, is get in sympathy with yourself through watching your breath and just allowing it to happen. And we're going to use a key word, inspiration, trusting in inspiration. And of course, this is a double-meaninged word, because we're talking about the breath, inspiration, and we're also talking about having inspiration, getting new ideas that just come to you. And when you're doing a divination, you're wanting the ideas to flow, the meaning of the cards, the meaning of the divinatory revelation to come to you as you're talking it out. So it's a good preparation for that. Then we're going to move into the next state, that is of gratitude, experiencing your breath as coming to you like a gift, that you could be grateful for it. It seemed like a simple thing, but actually behind that very simple experience, there's a profound alteration in consciousness. And being grateful for the breath begins a process in which your heart begins to open up, and you feel this love for simply for being, unconditional love just for existence itself. And this puts you into another level of divine order. Because when we are in a state of loving things just the way they are, then it's easier for us to appreciate, accept, and understand things as they are, with no attempt to change things according to our own will. And when we're wanting to interpret the manifestation of a divination, the toss of the cards, or the I Ching coins, or whatever it may be, We want to give an interpretation that's true, that's valid, that doesn't have our own self-interest in it, but we're surrendering to a higher truth. And what is the highest truth but the state of love? So that's the idea behind this. We're going to get into a state of flow in which we surrender any desire to control, and from that we move to gratitude for realizing that life breeds us. We're living without having to do anything about it, and then going to voluntarily embracing that then through the act of love and opening our heart and feeling a connection with all of life. Now I'm going to demonstrate this for you or guide you through it as like a formal little meditation that we'll be doing. But once you get the hang of it, then it's something that you can do very briefly in preparation for a divination. And actually, we're going to be using that later. And I'll be demonstrating the use of this method for understanding the tarot cards. But we'll start out in a kind of a formal way as a meditation that will be guided over maybe 5 minutes or so. And then you can play back this video and do it time and time again until you kind of perfect it and can work it out internally and make it something of your own experience, of your own creation. Okay, so here we go now. You can sit back and close your eyes. There's no need to look at me because I'm just going to be sitting here talking to you. Nothing's going to be going on the screen. But I'm going to have you just close your eyes and focus on your breathing. And remember, as I said before, just accept your breathing the way it is. You just want to be observing it. And I find that it's easiest to begin with the exhalations. Just focus on the exhalations now. And with every outgoing breath, just allow yourself to relax a little bit. Let each exhalation teach you something about letting go, relaxing. Each exhalation is a little relaxation, is a little letting go. So just go along with that and relax. And if you find that there's any body part that's feeling a little tense, then let it watch the breath go out. And as the breath goes out, to go along with that letting go and relaxing. With each outgoing breath, you can become a little bit more relaxed. It becomes a little easier to let go. Just enjoy that relaxing feeling of letting go with each exhalation. It doesn't matter how the breathing is going. It may be shallow at times, it may be fast, it may be slow, or more deep at other times. Whatever it is, simply trust that your breath is going along just fine, and just enjoy letting go during the exhalations. Letting go of all of your concerns, letting go of your need to do it right, letting go of any attempt to make any effort to have things go your way, and simply follow the breath, letting go with each exhalation. And then, as you let go in the exhalation, you'll find it easier each time to simply wait and allow the next breath to come to you on its own, coming when it will, as it will, and you simply accepting it. So as the breath goes out and you let go, let there be like a lesson in trust. The breath comes to you of its own, and you can accept it. You trust that it comes, you accept it as it comes, and you accept this gift of the breath. With every inhalation. With every inhalation, it becomes a little bit easier to trust. The breath goes out, and you let go. And another breath comes in, and you accept it, trusting in inspiration. Just allow yourself to enjoy this feeling of being breathed, that you can totally surrender. You can surrender and let go, and the universe breathes you. The breath comes, your needs are met, and you can let go
and just surrender, and the universe breathes you, and your needs are met. You're being taken care of. Spirit breathes you. Life breathes you. You can trust in inspiration. Just feel that sensation of being able to surrender into the feeling of trust, and this larger life force breathes you. Your boundaries dissolve as something greater than you, beyond you, comes and bees with you in your breath. Life breathes you. Spirit breathes you. And just enjoy this wonderful feeling. And with every cycle of your breath, it becomes easier to relax, to let go, to accept, to trust this gift of spirit that's with you now. You're in the flow of spirit. It's right here and it's right now. Just enjoy it. Accept it, enjoy it, and maybe even feel grateful for it. Feeling grateful for this gift of breath, this very gift of life that's coming to you without you having to do anything. It's coming to you and taking care of you, breathing life into you just as you need it. So experiment with a minute of feeling grateful. What's it like to feel grateful for this gift of breath? What is it like to feel gratitude? Perhaps in your heart, the normal organ for feeling gratitude, you can feel some kind of a response. In response to feeling gratitude, feeling appreciation for this mystery we take for granted so much, this mystery of breathing, you can feel your heart softening. Feel your heart warming, expanding. Just allow gratitude to fill your heart. You're already learning how to surrender and allow your boundaries to be expanded. And with the feeling of gratitude, your heart begins to open and your body begins to melt and soften. Love begins to bloom in your heart. You can feel your heart blossoming, growing bigger, reaching out. The love of the universe pours through your heart and it blooms larger and larger. You can feel one with the universe, embracing the universe. And by loving it, loving this life force, you come into a place of special understanding. The understanding of your intuitive heart. For as you connect with life, as you connect with the world, becoming one with it through love, you can feel a certain intimacy with life, a certain inner knowing. So just allow yourself to enjoy this experience of feeling the breath and trusting in inspiration, feeling your heart open in gratitude, love blossoming out, and you embrace life and you take life into your heart and you know it from within you. You and life are one. Your love makes you one with that which you love, and through that unity you come into an understanding. The harmony brings understanding. So just experience that now. Just enjoy that experience. Let it be with you. Thoughts may come through your mind, giving you some ideas about the meaning of this experience for you. Images may come to mind, helping you to understand what's happening. Just allow yourself to enjoy this state of consciousness that's in harmony with divine order. Your breath is in the flow. Your heart is one with the love of the universe. You're in harmony now with being. And now, in the state of mind, allow yourself to form some kind of an understanding or some kind of a picture of divine order. How do you see it? How do you feel it? What does divine order mean for you? Just allow yourself to experience it. Have a picture come, or perhaps a memory from the past will come and help explain this to you. What is divine order? What does it mean to you? How do you picture it? How do you imagine it? Okay. Now in just a moment we'll open our eyes, and you remember this image that you got of divine order. Taking it with you. Remembering how you got here, and you'll be able to return to this space again simply by focusing on your breath and being grateful for your breath, opening your heart. So now take a deep breath. That's it. Take a deep breath now. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Stretch and open your eyes. Oh, it feels so good. It's so good. I can sometimes describe it and do it at the same time. It's a very wonderful state, and it's very natural. Just with your breath, appreciating your breath and the easiness of the flow that comes, that's there for you, and then letting your heart open up. This will be our approach into getting into a state in harmony with divine order that we'll use in our divinations. And it's also going to be the basis of our intuitive heart divination process that we'll use to form a relationship with the tarot cards. Now, I asked you to get an image of divine order, and just in a second, we're going to see some of the students' drawings of their pictures of divine order. But before we look at those pictures, I want you to stop this tape, put it on pause, and make your own drawing before you see the others, to get your own picture of divine order. Because this could be the beginning, the basis of some kind of a metaphoric, symbolic foundation that you'll have for understanding what you're doing in divination, and may prove to be a very important talisman to empower you in the faith of your own intuition. So put this tape on pause, make your drawing of divine order, then come back on and we're going to look at some pictures and see them. So we're going to fade out now. When we come back, we'll be looking at some pictures of divine order. So do your drawing now, and we'll see you in just a minute.
Here divine order is shown in terms of a symmetry top and bottom, as above, so below, a prime example of divine order. Like the breath of God is blowing a wind across the planet, yet the many circles show that divine order is nevertheless intact. Here we see a tree, a perfect symbol for life on our planet. You have the roots beneath the ground and the tree above it. Here we have a figure 8 type of pattern, the great cycle of death and rebirth, the great return. Once again we have the circles, and you have the impression that amidst great change there are certain things that forever remain the same. This drawing seems to suggest that there's something outside of life that reaches down into life and gives it its order or meaning. As in heaven, so in earth, as above, so below, a perfect mirroring. Here's a feather, something made of earth but that can fly in the air. There are many levels to reality, but they're all one and the same. A classic image of divine order is life on our planet, with all the animals and all the plants that abound. A tree is a good image for divine order because it comes out of the ground and yet it reaches up for the sky. An ancient vision of divine order is the dance of the planets in the sky, the cosmic divine order. A heavenly circle blesses an earthly circle, and they look alike. The intelligence of energy crystallizing into matter, divine genius. The simple beauty of creation, the divine one awakening into two. As above, so below, the shining sun, the dancing daisy, love one another. Divine order may show itself in mathematics, in the geometry of energy manifesting into forms on earth. The divine mind is like a butterfly, constantly changing, transforming, and always colorful. What seems like chaos on our planet is really the divine mind at work, way beyond our comprehension. Here are some mandalas, some paintings that expresses the artist's vision of divine mind, divine order. Some highly structured, reflecting the mathematics, the regularity of divine order. Colorful, round, radiant. Here is a picture of nature, the divine order in the natural world, an overlay of colors and phenomenon. The geometry can be quite appealing. There's a regularity in creation that mathematicians understand. Everything is turning, changing, moving. The wind moves mills that grind the food that make our lives. The regularity, the square, the circle, these are the things of the divine mind. The atomic energy, down to the smallest of the small, underneath all that exists. The atom, smaller than the atom, the dot, the I, the perfect one. The circle, infinite, the square, manifest. How can the square embrace the circle? Within the stability of material forms, there is a movement, there is energy. Everything that is was at another time something else. We are all exchanging the atoms, the basic being of life. The star, the cross, it comes up and up again. The contradiction between the freedom of spirit and the earth. This tension between what is permanent, what is eternal, what is changing, heaven and earth. It can be crazy. It can seem random. and yet there is an intelligence to it in the background. It is there behind all events, no matter how chaotic, looking at us, aware, thinking through the experience. This divine mind can be a joker, can have fun. Creation is ebullient, joyful. And creation can hit some high notes, some moments of awe, of mystical wonder, the music of the spheres. There's a regularity in all things, even when we can't see it, and sometimes it is as regular as a checkerboard. But the sun shines through and gives its love to all on the planet regardless, and life abounds. It may seem random, but there is a reason behind it all. Okay, now we're going to do a demonstration of divination. We're going to be working with a tarot deck, and I'm going to be demonstrating a divination process that I call the intuitive heart divination process, or the intuitive heart discovery method, because it helps you discover your own intuitive wisdom about something that you're trying to understand. Now you'll be involved in learning how to work with the tarot deck, and I have here the Aquarian Tarot because it's one that I've used the most often, although I have many different tarot decks because I really do like the pictures. But I'm going to show you a way for you to get acquainted with the tarot in an intuitive manner. Because when you get a tarot deck, you'll usually get a book that goes along with it that explains the meaning of each of the cards and how to do a tarot reading, how to lay out the cards and interpret the different ones. And so as you start to do readings, you'll be referring to your book a lot in order to understand the symbolism. So then there's a lot of, you might say, book learning involved. And that's all well and good in terms of building up your background in symbology and mythology and understanding the archetypal cycles of development, death, and rebirth, and so on. It tends to divert your attention from the intuitive aspect that you bring to a reading. So I want to show you the way that I have my students make an intuitive connection with the cards in a tarot deck. What I've done is I've pulled out the 22 cards from the tarot deck of the major arcana. These are the heavy archetypal cards that are often in a deck numbered by Roman numerals. And what I suggest that you do, as I suggest to all my students, is that you make one card be the card for the day. Now you don't have to do this every day, but only do one card on a given day. And you form a relationship with that card, an intuitive relationship, and also watch the synchronicities. Now I'm going to explain this again. We'll go over it. But right now I'm going to describe the divination process that I'm about to do. First of all, the first step is that I will draw a card from this pile here. And then I'm going to do a divination on this card, not using any tools other than my own self. And what I'm going to do is ask that a memory come forth from my mind, and that this memory will teach me something about how I can relate to this particular card that I've chosen. We'll start out with a preparation, a meditative preparation, getting into the headspace of divine order, like using the breath and the heart that we've already practiced. And then I'll be using a memory divination, in that I have millions and millions of memories, many of them insignificant, most of them in fact. And I'm going to allow a memory to spontaneously come forth into my mind. This would be very much like drawing out a tarot card, or throwing some dice, or other kind of random event, except in this case a random event is going to be the memory that pops into my mind. And then, as we've already discussed in terms of metaphors, and that is in terms of understanding something unknown in terms of something known, which is what divination does and which intuition does, I'll be using something familiar, my memory, to understand something unfamiliar to me, and that is this tarot deck card that I've chosen. So then I will make a lesson from my memory and see what it has to teach me, and then I'll look at the card and I'll say, what is my lesson that I got from my memory? Help me see and understand this card in some very personal kind of way. That will make my personal connection with it. That will give me something that I can draw upon later, as we'll look in the book and see what the book says about the card. I also have here, in addition to the small booklet that came with the tarot deck, I have one of the many reference books on tarot right here. This one happens to be Jung and Tarot by Sally Nichols, and we'll be able to read a little bit more about that particular card. Okay, now, so that's basically the idea, and this is what I would suggest that you do. But I'll go through it, and then we'll review what I did and talk about how you can do something like this yourself as a way of getting acquainted with the major cards in the deck. You could do it with all of the deck, of course, but most significantly the 22 major cards, the real powerful archetypal cards. It'd be very good to do that. Then you'll have a foundation for drawing on your own intuition. I'm going to do an additional thing as well, something that I think is important as part of the practice, and that is when I actually see the card, and before I read about its meaning, of course I'll have my own memory divination to guide me to some extent, but I'm going to study the card for a moment and close my eyes and allow the images that remain in my mind from the card to move and animate and make a little movie, which I'll describe for you. And I'll use that movie as a way of reflecting my understanding of what I see going on in the card. This is be an exercise that helps me digest the information in the card and also prepare me in some way for understanding perhaps the dynamics in the imagery. Okay, so we're going to go first, and I'm going to shuffle these cards, and each day, or however often you want to do it, I'd suggest while you're studying the tarot, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, you pick a card for that day or for that 24-hour period or whatever. So I'm going to pick a card. I'm not going to look at it. And now I'm going to very quickly make this attunement that you've already practiced. And it's hard for me to talk while I'm tuning into my breath, but I'm going to let the breath go out and then come in of its own while I enter into the flow state. The flow state helps me not only get into the flow of the universe, part of the natural harmony, but it'll also allow my memories to flow easily without me making any effort.
And then I can feel the wonderful relaxation and sense of confidence that that brings. Allow myself to feel gratitude for my breath, coming from a place of abundance now. It's very consistent with the belief, the worldview, that everything I need I have within me, coming to me now. That my heart begins to open up in gratitude. And just reach out with my heart, as it were, and make a connection with that card. I don't know what the card is, but I just take it into my heart and love it. This is making a connection with it. So what is outside and inside become as one. And then I just ask, and the intuitive heart discovery method is a memory divination, that a memory will pop out into my mind that will provide me with a lesson that will be useful in understanding this card that I've selected. So, I see, remembering a time now, I'm out on the field in junior high, and there was a girl who was elected to be the Valentine's Queen. This was in 8th grade, and she had many suitors, many boys chasing after her. Obviously she was very popular, and that's why she was nominated Valentine's Queen, but she didn't want to reveal her hand too much and pick one of the guys to be her king, so she left it open to a lottery. And as a lark, I put my name into the hat. I mean, I kind of knew her, but we weren't close or anything. I certainly wasn't one of her suitors. But I put my name into the hat. And the time of the drawing, I was out playing marbles in the field with the other kids. And I can remember we're there playing, and I see this girl walking toward us. Not the girl who was the Valentine Queen, but this other girl. And I knew somehow that my name had been picked. And sure enough, she came over, and I was being summoned because the Valentine Queen had picked my name, and she wanted to speak with me. Because it turned out she wanted to talk about me getting in touch with her mom and so on, about what she was going to wear and so on, so that we would coordinate and make sure I was the right color. Anyway, that's the memory. I don't know why that came to mind, but let's examine it for a moment. You know, that's the picture. It's like my own personal tarot card. What's the lesson here? What do I see? Well, I see in that there's an event. Something happens. There's a surprise, and it's announced that I'm the winner. Also, this is a time when, I think one of the first times that I can remember, when I got kind of a glimpse into another dimension, because somehow I knew I was going to win. It didn't make sense. But when that girl walked up, I just knew, yep, I have won. I have been selected. And then she announces, you know, you've been called. You're the one. And it was like something clicked inside, and it was like a sense of recognition, of being told that you know, that your intuition is right. I don't even know if I knew that word, intuition, but somehow something inside was like, yeah, kind of a thing. And that was really, really special. The dance itself turned out to be a lark once we did our opening dance and everything. Our mom had made sure I was dressed appropriately and so on. We did the opening dance, and there wasn't. I never danced with her again the whole night. She had all her boyfriends. But the part that I remembered and what was in my image was the being called and being announced. You know, your name has been selected, and how that connected somehow with like a bells ringing or something, that you're right, some inner thing has been validated in some way. So that was a major major kind of experience. Okay, so let's turn over the card, and it is Judgment. Here, I'll let you take a look at it. Judgment, it's card 20, Roman numeral XX20. And what it has on the card is a horn. Someone's playing a horn, I see that. And the sun shining behind a cloud. And that's very much like that feeling, you know. Da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. Someone is announcing, proclaiming the sense of dawning awareness coming out from behind the clouds. There's flowers blooming. Something has been declared. Somehow I've been declared as the king. I've been declared the winner. The inner feeling has been made correct. Now I'm going to look at the card. I'll say what I'm seeing here, what I'm committing it to memory. Here I see a person with long hair and a robe. It looks like a feathered robe of some sort, and they have a long trumpet with a flag and a cross on it. In the background is a cloud with the sun rays coming above it like it's a sunrise. There's some yellow leaves, out of which some purple flowers are blossoming. And there's a mountain in the background. Looks like it's a black mountain with a side area of a lighter color. So I've tried to commit that to memory, and I'm going to close my eyes for a moment and picture it, try to see it in my mind. I see it in my mind. I see that flag with the cross. It's blowing in the wind. The wind's blowing as the guy plays the trumpet. Do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do-do. And the sun's opening out and shining. It's getting lighter. It's getting warmer. There's a really good feeling in the air. The flowers opening up, blossoming. I feel like something on the mountain is like it's melting. And it's like springtime. It's a new beginning somehow. Out with the old and in with the new. It'd be kind of like whatever darkness or doubts or what have you had been before. Now it's a new time, and I see the person playing the horn and now is making a proclamation, and he's saying, from this day forward we do declare that there are new rules apply. And the flowers open up and they're singing. I see them singing a little song about they're really happy to be out, and it's a whole new world that they're in. And they're tired of being in the seeds, and now they're out into the light, and they're really happy about that. And the sun's saying it's glad to not be on the other side of the planet, and glad that it's being able to participate in the morning. And the clouds are becoming transparent and allowing the sunshine to flow in. I hear church bells ringing, and people are coming out of their houses and dancing, and there's a great celebration. And it's almost kind of like the millennium or something like that, where it's just totally a new day. Okay, so that was a little fantasy that I had about what was going on in the card, in terms of a little cartoon or something. And that is just to give me more personal relationship with the card. Now, I will read about it. Let's see here. Where is it? Number 20, Judgment. A herald sounds a trumpet to the breaking day. A cross which seems to grow out of the darkness on a distant mountain is displayed from the banner which hangs from his trumpet. At his feet flowers grow. In the distance the sun rises above white clouds. So they're mentioning pretty much the details that I saw. The meaning, judgment. Judgment is the final personal experience and the beginning of the non-personal experience that follows the inevitable obliteration of the self. So some kind of a change in in one self-concept or something. In a limited sense, the movement of judgment is the same as the moment of awareness, shown in the card number 17, the star. How judgment has the added interpretation of being an unavoidable certainty which must come to all men sooner or later. The tarot, by its structured symbolism, gives the seeker a preview of this inevitability, and by reminding him of the impending doom of his personal self, encourages him to seek understanding of the cosmic self, the infinite nature of all things. And it's something like, you could call it the cosmic self, that I wouldn't have used those terms when I was a kid, but something about awareness of a cosmic self that was touched as that girl comes forward and announces, that I was the one that was chosen. Through an understanding of the symbolism of this card, the seeker can begin to be aware of the dawning of a new day, which comes to him who casts off the burden of ego and moves closer to the comprehension of his infinite nature. And that's certainly what I was doing at that particular moment. So you can see how the memory touches in to the card. I made this connection, and I did this memory divination through the intuitive heart discovery process, and made the connection with the card that personalizes it for me. It's a touchstone. I can remember what that felt like, and somehow that feeling, I accept that the synchronicity is meaningful, that the feeling that I had back then relates to the feeling being described or pointing to in the card Judgment, especially the theme about a new day, put away the old self, come on with the new self. And somehow for me saying, hey, this little person who's maybe doubtful or whatever needs to go away, because look, you were tuned in, you could make this kind of a connection. Now, if you want and you have a reference book, you can look up even more information about it. And I will look up in this book, there's 10 or 15, 20 pages about each of the major cards. It's much more in-depth than the books that usually accompany the deck of cards that you buy. And let's see here. Where is it? Judgment. I can't read it all because it's way too long. Judgment of Vocation. Here's a quote. Lo, I will tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. For this perishable nature must put on the imperishable, and this mortal nature must put on immortality. So she's using a different deck, the Marseille deck, and you can see that there, the card. It's different. It's like an angel coming down out of the sky that's playing the trumpet, and the three people down there on the in a bathtub or something are receiving this trumpet call. And it shows that the card decks can vary in the detail, but the general interpretation was very similar. Spiritual resurrection is a term that she uses, and sound as remember I was talking about hearing the bells ringing and so on. It's some kind of an announcement. Vitality, a new vitality comes in. And we could go on reading about it, and as I'm reading the material, I can be thinking about the memory divination that they did, and also the little cartoon that came to my mind, the celebration, the new day, and so on. And I have this personal background to guide me as I study the reference material. And whenever the Judgment card comes up in a reading, as I get into doing layouts and doing readings, I'll remember, of course, about this little experience that I have, and it gives me a basis for interpreting the tarot cards without having to look into the reference books and read it. So it gives me a leg up, and it also starts showing, you see, the role of intuition, because I was being very intuitive there in my connecting with that judgment card. Intuition is something where we feel around the corner, feel into the dark, and we somehow try to then understand what's around the corner, and it's reminding us of something. It brings up some understanding, it brings up some awareness, and we are intuitive about it. And so calling upon a memory just makes that very explicit. And what we do in a divination is we're trying to understand the nature of things. We can't see them, so we pull out something that we can see, like a card, and we interpret the card to understand that hidden thing. So it's very similar, you see. I'm being intuitive, I'm doing a divination. The intuitive heart discovery method, you can look at it as an act of intuition, or you can look at it as an act of divination. And I think that it's important that you see that kind of a connection, because it starts opening your mind to how all these things tie in and relate. So what I'd suggest that you do then, you see, is you get out at least the major cards, the 22 cards. You might want to do it with all of them, but a few times a week, but not more than once a day. Draw a card out. Don't look at it. Just lay it there. Make the intuitive heart connection with it. That is, go into the state of mind of the divine mind, divine harmony that you get from your breath and the gratitude, opening your heart. Make that heart connection with the card. Then do a memory divination and let a memory come out. And you notice what I did with the memory. I asked, what does it have to teach me? What can I learn from it? And you know, the lesson being that that sometimes, you know, you are unexpectedly called. Your name comes up, as it were, something where you have an inner inkling, and then it manifests on the outside, and the inside and the outside becomes one, and there is this awakening. That was kind of like the lesson that I took from it, to let go of doubts and trust in intuition, and thus in the expanded self. And this is my own personal touchstone then to that card, the judgment card. I also did a little movie, let a cartoon develop. Now what I would do is I would give myself about 24 hours, maybe a little bit longer, and be on the lookout for synchronicities. I mean, wouldn't it be funny if I ran across a horn, or someone calls my name, a long-lost friend, and they holler, and I turn around, you know, who's that? And it's some long-lost friend, or who knows, the kinds of synchronicities that I'll be aware of in the next day as I read this chapter on judgment. And I'm sort of filling my mind with my understanding about this card, as then the synchronicities that happen will help me understand the card too. That way, I'll be drawing upon my own intuition and the synchronistic world to teach me about the card, and it won't be strictly a matter of book learning. Like I say, the book learning is fine, but you don't want to lose out from our general purpose here in developing the art of divination, to remember that ultimately its purpose is to awaken you to your own intuition so that you can see divine order in events around you, and so that you can learn how to tune in and be your own divining rod. So if you were to rely strictly on the books and what it says in the books and leave it at that, it would seem like kind of a rote thing. It would seem like it was set in concrete, that this was something that was kind of like fixed. In fact, the truth of the matter is that your own intuition kind of governs how you work with the cards. You can certainly be knowledgeable of symbolism and tradition and history by the reading, but then you'll be able to pull it together. You get into kind of a flow space of thinking and talking, and as you talk it out, more information comes to you.
Like it was for me a new day. I was like crowned king, that day. I went from a mere mortal to the Valentine king. Certainly not deserved in the sense of her favorite suitor or what have you. It was just somehow a part of destiny. And the being chosen itself, or that announcement, that judgment, as it were, that was a lot more significant than the actual fact of going through it, that nothing really had changed. I was still my ordinary self. She danced with all the other boys and not with me. But at the same time, I was no longer the same, because somehow it's like as a hand coming down out of the sky and saying, Henry, we know what you've been thinking, and yes, we want you to realize that we're aware of you, and we want you to be aware of us. Sort of like, the higher self talking or something like that. So this is now a process that I'd like you to do, and see how it goes for you. And then I think that you will be in a much, much better frame of mind to work with the tarot deck as an intuitive act rather than as some kind of formula, which would be very intuitive and would kill it, would really kill the spirit of it. So you've seen me do it. It's very easy, very natural, and I know that you'll be able to do it yourself. Just get into the flow and be sincere in the enjoyment of the flow of the breath. Really feel yourself embracing the card. Really just allow the memory to come and play with it and so on, and then look at the card and see what you got and see what kind of a connection that you can make. And it doesn't matter if you feel like that you're making up the connection. That doesn't really matter, because it's a storytelling. Divination is a story. It's you telling a story about reality. You're making up a story of reality that may then reveal some interesting things that we hadn't seen before and allow us to walk into that reality in a different way. And that is the purpose of divination, because it helps you then become a co-creator, realize your own role in the flow, the scheme of things. You're not the boss. You're not in control, you're in a flow, but you're a participant, you're a co-creator. So enjoy that, let the divination process help you discover that. And if you then discover that play of the divine mind within you, then you will have realized the spiritual purpose of divination. So with that, I wish you very good luck, and looking forward to being with you in the next video seminar on divination, in which we're going to explore some divination games to broaden your perspective about it. But until then, practice the getting into divine mind, practice doing the intuitive heart discovery process, and with the memory divination, work with some of the tarot cards until you really are establishing a relationship with them. And until then, let yourself be born anew. So long. Bye-bye.